This is the Ball Talk Podcast, presented by Nachos Analysis.
What's going on, Tiger fans? Today is February 2nd, and welcome to the first episode of the Ball Talk Podcast presented by Nachos Analysis. I'm your host, Drew Archer, and if you're hearing me and you are subscribed to the college football show and you just happen to log on to Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to your podcast, and you're like, what is this Ball Talk Podcast? Well, we're releasing the Ball Talk podcast on the same stream as the college football show. So I hope you stay subscribed for this season. There's a lot going on with baseball and softball. So those of you who have never subscribed to the Ball Talk podcast, wondering what it is, this is me. If you're familiar with the college football show, I had a co-host, Matthew Johnson. Matthew is not joining me for Ball Talk. It's just going to be me solo. But welcome into Ball Talk. I've been talking about wanting to do a baseball podcast, a softball podcast for a while now. So it's time. I'm excited. This is one of my most exciting times of the year. I know that I'm probably a bigger Clemson football fan, but baseball gets me excited. So I am releasing this episode on February 2nd. However, I'm recording this episode on January 28th. If that rings a bell, baseball practice started yesterday for me, so the 27th. And depending on how long this podcast takes me, I might drive over to Doug Kingsmore and watch practice. So for those of y'all who want to catch some baseball before the season starts, all practices are open to the public. They're free. So as soon as I'm done here, I'm going to hit 85 south towards the Clemson and hopefully go watch some baseball. But thank you for joining. If you are listening to this, how you typically listen to podcasts, whether on Spotify, Apple, Google, whatever, where you're driving in the car, listening with headphones, we are testing out YouTube. So there's a chance some of you are watching my face right now on YouTube. Y'all be nice. I know I got a face for podcasting, so bear with me. Bear with the editing process. I don't know. We'll see how much of a task this is going to be for me to edit these each week. But wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping before we got going. But before we do the housekeeping, going to give you a preview of what to expect in today's episode. My mother raised me as a gentleman. My father raised me as a gentleman. So we're going to go ladies first. Each episode, we're going to spend the first half of the podcast talking about Clemson softball. Softball team off of a historic run last year, finished 42-17, and look to build off of that again this year and hopefully go a little bit further. After that, we're going to get into the poll of the week. This week's poll is, what is your favorite Clemson softball and uniform combination? We'll break that down here in a minute, and it was actually a pretty close vote, a lot closer than I thought. And then we're going to discuss Clemson baseball. There was a coaching change in the offseason. So if this is news to you, you've probably been living under a rock. But Coach Monty Lee was fired on May 31st. And then Coach Erik Bakich was brought in formally on the staff in 2002 as an assistant coach. Returns 20 years later to Clemson to be the head man himself. So we're going to discuss Clemson baseball. And speaking of Coach Erik Bakich, we're going to have him on the show. So head coach Erik Bakich will wrap up today's show. He was gracious enough just before practice started to give me a little bit of time so that we have a good guest on episode 1. So that is what is in store today. But a little housekeeping. So for those of y'all who are familiar with the college football show that we produce, like I mentioned, I have a co-host for that show. This one's going to be me solo. So Matthew doesn't really follow Clemson baseball or softball quite like I do. Mine's probably a bit of an obsession, probably spent way too much time The car gets a lot of miles this time of year driving back and forth between Greenville and Doug Kingsmore Stadium. But we're going to air just like the college football show every Thursday at 7 o'clock. I will say, like I mentioned at the top, I'm learning this video editing thing and YouTube and all of that stuff. So maybe the first couple weeks, maybe, I don't know, the YouTube video might not be up right at 7 p.m., but bear with me and I will get those up. But definitely on all the podcasting platforms will be out every Thursday at 7 o'clock. Also, 30-minute episodes. I don't know that you want to hear me talk for 30 minutes, and I don't know if I can talk for 30 minutes straight. I'm used to having a co-host where if I need to sneeze or cough and that sort of thing, Matthew can kind of carry the conversation, or if I get thirsty like I am right now. So I'm going to take a pause real quick and have a sip of water. But 30-minute episodes, keep them short, concise. There's a lot of baseball and softball going on a weekly basis, so we're going to hit the high notes. We're going to review the games that just happened and then preview what is to come that weekend, with Thursdays being our release date. Softball has a lot of Thursday games, so some of those games you'll be hearing me kind of talk about as if they're in the future, and they may have already happened, but just the way the schedule works. So, and then I'd say about 75% of the episodes for the college football show, we had a guest. We're not going to have weekly guests. Most of the time it's going to be me, but we are periodically going to sprinkle in some guests. Like I mentioned, Coach Bakich will join me for today's episode. And then we will have Tyler Corbett for next week's episode. So 2 episodes and 2 guests. But without further ado, let's talk some softball. So, as I mentioned at the top, historic run last year for the softball team. They finished the season 42-17, 14-10 in the ACC, and they fell to Florida State in the ACC championship tournament 6-8. That is the second year in a row that the Tigers had advanced to the championship round in the ACC tournament. So I definitely think if you're Coach Rittman, that is your goal. You've gotten there 2 times. You want to get over that hump and win the ACC. They hosted their first regional last year. One thing with that regional, they didn't give up a single run at all. All right, they played UNCW, wrapped that game up in 5 innings. And won 9-0. They played Auburn, won that 1-0, which that was, I believe I'm right in saying that was the only game that I actually attended last year. I tend to spend more time over at the baseball stadium, but my brother, who is a Clemson and Auburn grad, was able to come up, and some folks in the Cajun Cafe hooked us up with some tickets for that Auburn game, and it was electric. That was no shade on the baseball team, but that was the most exciting game I attended in the spring last year. After the baseball season's hot start, you thought, oh man, they might go 56-0, go to Omaha, win the whole daggum thing. But no, obviously that's not the case. So that Auburn game, that was exciting. Being able to go with my brother, the crowd was electric. There was not a single crowd in Doug Kingsmore Stadium quite like that last year. So awesome game there where they defeated Auburn 1-0, and then Louisiana, they finished that one in 5 innings as well, winning 8-0 to earn their first Super Regional berth. The Super Regional did not go the way that the Tigers had hoped. They got swept in 2 games. They went to the Stillwater Regional out in Oklahoma. Oklahoma State was the 7th national seed last year, and they have a great program out there. Going into it, you had to, obviously Oklahoma State was favored, but you thought the way that Clemson was kind of hitting their stride and beating people the way they were, especially in that regional, you thought at least they probably have a chance there. But they lost game 1 0-2 and game 2 1-5. So they really didn't get any kind of offense going, which is credit to Oklahoma State. That is not that's not a quality of Coach Rittman's teams to get shut out like that. 2 games only scoring 1 run, getting outscored 7-1 there. So you have to like what's going on in Tiger Town with that softball team. I think I remember, and I think I'm right in referencing this, that they're looking at already expanding the McWhorter Stadium out there, putting more seats out there. And I think I saw a picture a couple weeks ago where they're actually opening up more standing room only there in the right field, because the right field area had kind of been blocked off. There was wasted space essentially. So getting Clemson softball tickets were hard to come by. So they're already trying to open it up to get more fans in there. It's not quite 2,000 people can fit in there. I think it's more along the lines of 1,200, 1,500, something like that. So having that extra standing room out in the outfield is going to give more fans opportunity to get out there. But all that to say, Clemson is putting out a product that people want to see. We'll get into it a little bit with the baseball talk, but the baseball team down the stretch last season, pretty much the full season the year prior, was not putting out a product that people wanted to see. I think in general you saw attendance drop for the baseball team. But as evident by the softball team, if you put out a good product, they're going to come, they're going to support, they're going to be loud, and they're going to give you that home field advantage that Clemson's known for in a lot of its sports. So the first 3 seasons of the program could not have started off better, with the exception of the COVID year. But you saw a lot of success in that first COVID year. The Tigers finished that year before the season was cut short 19-8. They finished 5-1 in the ACC. So couldn't really ask for a better start there. Then in 2021, they finished 44-8. This is year 2 of the program. Coach Rittman has got this team shooting on all cylinders. 44-8 in year 2 of the Clemson softball program. That's insane. They also went 29-5 in the Atlantic Coast Conference. They defeated Georgia Tech and Virginia Tech in the ACC tournament that season, ultimately falling to Duke 0-1 in the ACC tournament championship game. That was that first of the 2 consecutive years they've made it to the ACC championship and not won it. They also, in 2021, had their first regional berth. Last year was the first year that they hosted a regional, but in 2021, they made a trip down to Tuscaloosa. They defeated Troy 8-0. Basically, the story of this regional was 2 wins to Troy, 2 losses to Alabama, the host there. So they beat Troy 8-0 in game 1, lost to Alabama 0-6. Game 2, beat Troy again 4-2, and then lost to Alabama 0-5. So even though it was a benchmark for this program, you go into Tuscaloosa, face a good Crimson Tide team, and get blanked. Don't score a single run. So if the trajectory continues, then you might see Clemson get over the hump in the Super Regional. All right, they had struggles in the regional last year. They got over that this year. They had struggles in the Super Regional last year. All right, and hopefully we'll see them get over that hump this year. So what are the expectations for year 4? After visiting that championship game, after participating in it for 2 years and not winning it, I think that's your goal this year, and I think that's attainable. The preseason poll came out just recently. Florida State is favored to win the Atlantic Coast Conference. Clemson second, right behind them. So good odds for the Tigers. Florida State, as I'm learning, obviously I didn't really keep up with softball until Clemson got a team, but Florida State is one of those programs that I quickly learned is very dominant, and the Tigers are going to have to go through them if they want to win the ACC this year. Obviously, after the first 3 years that they've had hosting a regional last year, you gotta say hosting a regional again this year is another goal. And then getting over that hump in the Super Regionals. you've seen progress like I've touched on for the last 3 years. They're getting better and better each season. So really looking forward to softball getting started. That will be here in a very short turnaround. If you're listening to this podcast on the day it airs, February 2nd, then you're 7 days away from first pitch, opening day. The Tigers will travel down to Florida to play in the FIU tournament. And I believe I'm right in saying they play FIU in the first game at 5:30 p.m. So kind of excited that it's a evening game. I think at least their very first year, the very first game Clemson ever played was like 11 o'clock in the morning or something like that. So at least this one will be at a good time to where fans are able to watch. They get home after work. But as is custom, the Tigers start on the road in some kind of preseason tournament before they come up to Clemson and start their home stretch. So next week I'm going to dive into Clemson and who's returning, preview the season, talk a little bit about Coach Rittman. So with it being officially a game week, next week's episode will be kind of a season preview for the softball team. All right, poll of the week. What is your favorite Clemson softball uniform combination? I'm going to sandwich this Twitter poll in between the baseball and softball segment each week. Sometimes it'll be related to both teams. Sometimes it'll be one or the other. I figure throwing it right in between here will kind of work itself out. So what is your favorite Clemson uniform combination? And before I reveal the results, there's only one way that we get this information, and this is on Twitter. So if you do not follow Nachos Analysis on Twitter, check us out. That's where we're going to put the poll each week. We're going to have a lot of information. We're releasing a weekly newsletter that's going to come out every Monday covering baseball and softball. So a lot of coverage there. So if you want to stay up to date on A, the Ball Talk podcast, but B, Clemson baseball and softball, a lot of information there. If you ask my wife, I spend way too much time on Twitter. So a lot of good information there, and that's where fans were able to vote in this poll. So the options were, and it only gives you 4 options in a Twitter poll, but I made it easy with the options I picked and allowed if one of these 4 options you didn't like, you could comment your let me grab my phone because I did have at least one person comment their favorite uniform combination. The options in the poll were all orange, all purple, all white, or all gray. The results were a little closer than I thought. I'm not a fan of gray, and gray got a lot of votes in this. The final result, the number one answer, the favorite of the fans was all purple. Then you had gray and orange tied with 25% of the vote, and all white 21% of the vote. This went the total opposite of how I voted. I think those all whites look really cool and really clean. So I voted for all white. The cool thing about getting a new team like a softball team, now you're going to have a lacrosse team, a gymnastics program. It brings out the new uniforms. I'm a traditionalist when it comes to football. I like the orange on white or the all white, but that's because of tradition and how it looks and that kind of stuff. With softball, it's a new team. They don't have tradition, so you can kind of be a little bit more experimental with the uniform combinations you throw out there. So they definitely wear those all grays a lot. I'd be lying if I said that I liked them. I do not like those all grays, but we did have one other person comment of a combination that was not listed on there. Bailey Black said he likes the purple jerseys on top of the orange pants. So that's a popular one in football as well. Well, actually, I take that back. Flipped is the popular one in football there. I think when the football team wore those purple on orange, that might have been one of the ugliest uniform combinations I've ever seen. So, but thanks to Bailey for getting in on that, and thank you to all of the followers on Twitter that voted. So we'll be posting that each week around Tuesday, I think, Monday, Tuesday, because I'm going to be recording every Wednesday for these to be released on Thursday. So All right, before we get into baseball, happy to announce that we've partnered with Pump Monkey Septic Service as a sponsor for the Ball Talk podcast this year. So really excited to partner with Pump Monkey, owned and operated by a Clemson alumni who still lives here in the upstate, and they service all of the upstate. So septic tank issues are one of those things that you don't want to be in a bind when you need somebody. So bookmark Pump Monkeys. They're on Facebook. They're on Instagram. You can reach them via phone, and you can call them. You can text them. So very convenient with how you can reach out to them. Phone number for Pump Monkey Septic Service is 864-710-2211. 864-710-2211. My good buddy Alan Powell, or if you know Alan Powell or spent any time in Clemson, you probably know of him. He goes by AP. He never dreamed of owning a septic service. The way he got to starting this company was out of need. He had a septic tank issue and was told that nobody could get out to him for 2 to 3 weeks. That let him know that there was a demand for a septic service. So he started Pump Monkey. So, and I asked him, I was like, do we do a tagline with this? How do you want to wrap up my ad read for you each week? And he's really good, if you follow him on Instagram and Facebook, coming up with a lot of interesting sayings, to say the least. So he threw one out there that I kind of like, that I'm going to stick with as their tagline for the ad reads each week. But when the dump's funky, call Pump Monkey. All right. Clemson baseball. I am very excited about this baseball season. I get excited this time of year anyway, but with the new head coach, Erik Bakich, Coach Monty Lee leaving, transfers leaving and coming, there's a lot of excitement, a lot to take in, and it's got me that much more excited. So really looking forward to this season. It's unfortunate that it did not work out with Coach Lee. Coach Lee was always super good to me. Reached out with things that answers to questions that I had posed. Did an interview with him. He was always very friendly and good to us, and a great dude, great husband, great father. And you really hate any time to see someone lose their job. But May 31st was the day they let Coach Monty Lee go. He was the 27th head coach in the history of the program, and he didn't do bad at Clemson. He unfortunately just didn't uphold the standards that this program has. He finished with a record of 242 and 136, 102 and 86 in the ACC, so just above 500 in conference, and did pretty well overall. But again, by Clemson standards, just was not getting it done. If we take a look at like his time here as head coach, had really solid early success. Some of the naysayers may say, well, those were Leggett's guys, and you can definitely make that argument. Finished with 44 wins in 2016, 42 in 17, 47 in 18. The Tigers in 2018 won the Atlantic Coast Conference, and then from there it slowly kind of started to go downhill. Finished 2019 with 35 wins. 2020 got started with a great start before the COVID cancellation. They were 14-3 in that year, 3-0 in the ACC. They were about to go on I think it was a back-to-back week of road ACC games. It's you really hate that, obviously COVID, but that team looked like it was ready to make a run that year, and I would have loved to see it. I remember sitting in the stands that very last game sitting out in right field where I typically sit, and they were playing Winthrop. It was the first time that they wore their pinwheel hats, the newest hat that Clemson has with I believe it's orange bill, white front, and purple back. They're playing Winthrop there. It went into extra innings, and throughout that game, I was getting notifications on Twitter of the NBA shutting down and all that stuff. And as I was leaving the game, I looked over to one of my buddies as I was walking out of Doug Kingsmore. I was like, this might be the last game that we see here for a little while. Now, when I said that, I didn't think that they were just going to flat out cancel the whole year. But what could have been in 2020? 2021, Clemson had its first losing season in a very long time. They finished the season 25-27. And then last year, 35-23. And off the top of my head, I cannot remember the start, but it was something like 14-0 or something like that. An amazing start that, unfortunately, once you hit league play, kind of fizzled out. For the second consecutive year, they finished below 500 in conference play. Overall, like we said, 242 and 136 was Coach Monty Lee's final record before he was let go at Clemson. He did land on his feet. He made his return back to the University of South Carolina. He was hired on August 18th as the associate head coach and recruiting coordinator. So it's good to see him land back on his feet, go back somewhere where he is comfortable, where he knows what's going on. He was there on that run with South Carolina when they went to the College World Series. So you just hate to see it be a rival, but he was a Gamecock first. So and with him, he did take a few transfers. So Dylan Brewer, Jonathan French, Ricky Williams, and I feel like there was one other one, but I can't remember. But at least 3 Tigers followed Coach Lee to Columbia. So if we're looking ahead to the South Carolina series, which is always exciting anyways, that first Friday night when South Carolina comes to Doug Kingsmore Stadium, I think there's going to be a little extra juice this year with Coach Lee in the dugout, potentially Dylan Brewer out there in right field, where we sit in the Cajun Cafe. So I'd imagine he might have a few words from some fans out there. So that ought to make that series a little extra exciting. On June 16th, Clemson hired its 28th head coach, Erik Bakich. He returns after being here 20 years ago. He was on Coach Leggett's staff as an assistant in 2002. If you followed Clemson baseball for any amount of time, 2002 was a big year for the program. So he was a part of that team. And after that season, Coach Bakich went on to coach at Vanderbilt as an assistant, and then became the head coach at Maryland for a couple years, and then spent his last 10 years in Michigan, where he led the Wolverines to the 2019 College World Series. And then he also in 2019 was the National Coach of the Year by 3 different outlets there. So when names started getting thrown out there, I remember hearing a lot about Coach Bakich. His name was getting thrown out there quite a bit. And I've spoken with him twice now. We did an interview with him about a month after he was hired and on the job and that kind of stuff. And then obviously for this episode, I think Clemson made the right decision. Everything he's saying, which if you're a coach and you don't win the press conference, then you definitely weren't the right fit. But just because he won the press conference doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be win and be successful here. But from what we've heard and seen out of him so far, I think as Clemson fans, you got to like what you see. And with his return to Clemson, he's kind of bringing back a version of the old era. Me personally, just based on what I've seen and heard from him, I kind of get the vibe that he's going to be somewhere in between Coach Lee and Coach Leggett. He's going to leave a little bit of flexibility and wanting the players to be loose, but also have that kind of strict, structured mindset, which we've seen a lot of already. And speaking of Coach Leggett, he's brought him back on staff. So Coach Leggett His officially his position is called Program Development on the website, which when I was looking up, because I wanted to make sure I got his title right, I kind of like it on the website. You got all the players and coaches with their headshots and everything, the nice Nike uniforms and all that. Coach Leggett's headshot on the website is his old headshot from back when he was head coach years ago. So kind of like that, kind of respect that. So Coach Bakich has kind of implemented quite a few things during the fall. If you recall, the players were not allowed to wear any shirts, hats, that kind of stuff with any of the Clemson logo on it. They had to earn the right to wear the Clemson C. They had to earn the right to wear the Tiger Paw. They didn't have access to batting cages, locker rooms, that kind of stuff. He wanted the players to work for it, earn it, have buy-in, and not just take things for granted. They've implemented a lot of community service where I believe it's Thursdays. Every Thursday they're doing community service, which has become a cool thing to see and watch on social media each week. So, and then if I'm remembering correctly, I read this way back when, and I do want to shout out Larry Williams. He was one of our last guests in the last episode of the college football show. But Tiger Illustrated has had an ongoing thread since the firing of Coach Lee and hiring of Coach Bakich, and that's been one of my favorite things to follow on a daily basis is that baseball thread there. But if I remember correctly, whether it be on there or somewhere else, I think that he's tying facial hair into the GPA, which, if I'm remembering correctly as well, Coach Leggett did not allow facial hair or long hair. Coach Bakich kind of seems a little bit somewhere in between. Hey, if you earn it, then you can have some facial hair. And I think this team stepped up and did it, because if I remember correctly, and now as I'm saying that, I feel like I said if I remember correctly like 5 times, so y'all bear with me. If I remember correctly, I believe they just set a record for the baseball program in GPA. So whatever he is doing is working. And one other final thing here, as you'll hear in the interview, I know a lot of older Clemson baseball fans were Clemson baseball uniforms are a big thing. And when Clemson made the switch to Nike, they got that thinner stripe on the pants, the classic Clemson cut pants that the Tigers are known for. That stripe got smaller. A lot of people complained about the width of it and that kind of stuff. But Coach Bakich, today I'm joined by Clemson baseball head coach Erik Bakich. Thanks for joining the show, Coach.
Happy to be on, Drew. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So the last time that you and I spoke, school was out for the summer. Your family had not yet made the move to Clemson. And your new team was kind of spread out across the country at various summer leagues. Now you've had your first fall under your belt with the team, and soon we'll start practice. What were your goals heading into fall practice, and how did the team handle those expectations?
Yeah, a lot of the goals, I don't know if we listed goals for the off season, so to speak, but a lot of the programming and the environment we were shaping was specifically around just creating a foundation. And I thought we did a really good job of that. Foundationally, of course, the baseball component and putting in all of, our coaching philosophies and the X's and O's types of things, but bigger picture, the mental side of performance and really diving into the mental game. And then even bigger than that, the service side of being a student athlete and really engaging with the Clemson community and getting out weekly within the community in various places, various organizations. And I thought that all of that together, once we got through the summer and putting a staff together and just kind of mapping out the game plan for the fall, I thought our team was all in, totally bought in, fully engaged. Really a pleasure to be around all incredible kids. So, the even beyond that, just building a relationship with all of them and creating that team chemistry and harmony that exists within a team. Those were all the positives of the fall. Real easy to see how physically talented these guys are from the neck down. So, everything that, that we centered on outside of the field is more, between the ears, mental game, perspective building, service-based leadership training, things like that.
And that was something I got to the point where I was kind of looking forward to each week on social media, was what the service project was for the week. So really cool. You did an interview recently with the MLB Network, and one thing that I'd not thought of until it was kind of brought up there is the home stretch that Clemson has to start the season off, and how that's probably a little unfamiliar for you up in Michigan. I think last year you didn't play your first home game until a month into the season. What's that like, preparing a team for a month on the road? And then what are you looking forward to about having a bunch of games to start the season off at Doug Kingsmore Stadium?
Well, preparing for life on the road is, I don't know if you can prepare for, the unexpected unknowns, and we would have a lot of those. And that was really the mental weight of 4 straight weeks of planes and buses and hotels. Is, everybody's experienced travel delays and hiccups with travel. And so we would have our fair share of those with the weather in that part of the country. But it's just, the college baseball season starts around Valentine's Day, which seems nuts, that it starts that early. But for half the country, that means that, they're traveling. And so getting the team ready to prepare, a lot of times you just have to be super efficient with your time, because you don't have the beautiful sunny days we have here in January. We were outside for a little bit yesterday doing our group work, and I just remember looking up thinking, it's January 15th, yesterday, and it's sunny and blue skies and beautiful. And so I think this, just seeing that type of advantage of just being from the preparation standpoint, really stands out, because we would, half the country is, they're trying to get their little windows of, they're checking the weather every day, and even when it's bad weather, they still got to go out. So, we had a policy at Michigan, if it was above 0 degrees, we were going outside for training. And when it was really cold, like single digits, we might not be out there very long, maybe 15 or 20 minutes, just doing pop fly communication or something. But that's what you're doing. You're doing a lot of short training outside, and most of your training is inside. And here it's really the opposite. The only time we can't get out on the field is when it rains and the dirt's wet, and we got to go in the cages, which has happened, but it's just nothing that can duplicate being outside and just looking up and seeing a beautiful sunny day to have true baseball weather in.
Absolutely. Willie Weiss and Riley Bertram, who both played for you at Michigan, were recently recognized by D1 Baseball as 2 of the top 100 transfers nationally. What can Clemson fans expect out of them this spring?
Well, they're 2 former captains. They were captains at Riley's a 2-time captain. Willie was a captain last year. So that just the know-how, just the having been there before, they've played in big crowds and big environments. They've played on big stages. So I think just, having that experience to relay to the guys, to the rest of the team, what it's like to play in a super regional and the World Series. And, and of course, all the Clemson players know big crowds and big rivalries and all that stuff. So it's nothing like that. It's just more the being the conduit from some of the things we've taught this fall, like the way we do mental game training and some of those things, and how they can relate in those moments when the lights are a little brighter and the stage is a little bigger. But in terms of their physical play, Riley Bertram is just a very consistent, steady, what you're going to get. It's not necessarily the flashy player, but he's the steady player. You know, he hit just under 300 last year with almost 20 doubles, and you know, played great shortstop for us. I don't know if, you know, he'll be somewhere in the infield here, but you know, with Ben Blackwell and Blake Wright, you know, we've got three guys we feel really good about. So we'll see how that plays out. But you know, you'll hear him on the field. He talks a lot. He's great at communicating, and you know, just one of those guys that's just a very headsy, high IQ college baseball player. Gets a lot of clutch hits. And then Willie Weiss he was the closer at Michigan from his freshman year on. We tried to convert him to a starter last year just to help us because our pitching staff was a little thin. And so he's done a multitude of roles at Michigan from closing to starting, but you know, he's pitched in the World Series, he's pitched in big games, he knows there's not an environment that we're going to see here that's going to be too big for him. And he's made a lot of strides with Coach Bellinger, our pitching coach here, who has really helped him specifically with his fastball command. Because Willie later in his career was mostly a one pitch guy with the slider. And now he's made a lot of strides with developing the fastball and developing the changeup as well, or at least he's always had a fastball, but throwing it for more strikes and being able to utilize the changeup. So, you know, this Riley and Willie, you know, just they were at Michigan, but you could talk about, you know, stories like that with a lot of these guys and the strides that they've made this fall that have been awesome to see.
And that kind of led into my next question: who should fans have their eye on kind of heading into this season? Who had a big fall, and who can they expect to make a big impact?
Well, there's a lot of guys. I mean, my mind always goes to the older guys just because, you know, I kind of always lean towards the experienced guys who have been there before. And so, you know, having some guys come back that maybe could have had the opportunity to sign pro, or, you know, didn't necessarily have to come back. You know, Ryan Ammons could have signed pro, could have probably been a late round pick. And, you know, everyone knows his late inning heroics as a closer. And he's just a guy that, you know, he's been a great leader of the pitching staff and really sets, you know, a standard for work ethic, and has done a fantastic job. So we've actually, you know, converted him more into a starting pitcher type of role. So I think fans will really enjoy seeing him, you know, on the front end of a game instead of the back end of a game. And, you know, he's got such a special fastball and slider combination and split. And he's just a good pitcher that, you know, we really want to maximize him in our staff. So I think fans will be excited about him. He's one that jumps out in terms of, you know, someone that maybe will have a different role than they had last year, but people know, you know, him, know who he is, know what he can do. So he's a guy for sure.
In year one at Clemson, what are your goals for this team, and what does a successful season look like to you?
Well, we define success as, you know, kind of that old, somewhere in there's that John Wooden definition of success of, you know, it's a success if the player reaches his maximum potential and the team reaches its maximum potential. And if we're going off of that standard, if this team reaches its max potential, what I've told them, you know, the coaches have told them, what we've seen with our eyes is that this team is not lacking anything in terms of being able to compete at the highest level. You know, navigating your way through the postseason. Obviously, we have to do well throughout the entire season, starting with Binghamton on game one. So we're not overlooking anything, but teams are judged by how they finish. And this team has all the ingredients of being a championship team in conference play. And this team has all the ingredients and the physical talent, not lacking anything, to make a run through the postseason. You know, just use a frame of reference from just a few years ago with the physical talent we had on our roster at Michigan that ended up playing for a national championship. And this team is deeper. and has more talent 1 through 40 than that team does. So, there's no shortage of physical talent. We'll try to make our own breaks and get that luck by being aggressive and creating opportunities. But as long as this team can handle some adversity and be able to survive that gut punch that everybody has to take, and be able to recenter and get back to the middle, not get too high, not get too low, and really just truly keep getting better as the season progresses. There's no reason why we can't talk about going to Omaha and winning a national championship. And so we have, and we've just set our sights there. And every team at Clemson from here on out will set a goal to win a national championship. And we'll train and prepare that way, as that's the ultimate goal. And then we'll always reduce it down to the power of one. One day, one inning, one game, one pitch, one breath, one meeting, one rep. Basically whatever you're doing at that moment is the most important thing you're doing. And so we'll have huge, lofty goals, and then we'll always laser it back in on getting better right now.
And lastly, before I let you go, I've word is you've been working with Nike to get the classic wider stripe back on the breeches there. Will we see the Tigers rocking those this season, or are there any other uniform changes fans going to expect?
Well, that's probably been the biggest challenge there is so if any seamstress is listening on this Zoom, we've had a heck of a hurdle going over, because what we have to do, Nike makes their pants and the stripe is built in to the fabric. They're not, the old school pants, you would have the thick stripe sewn on the outside of the white pants. Nike now makes this is performance pant that's lighter. So this thin, 3/4 inch stripe is built in, to the pant the way it's made when it gets made. And so number one, we have to find a thicker purple stripe. Then, so find the 1.5 inch to 2 inch thick stripe. Then we have to find somebody who can sew that onto our existing pants over what they already have sewn on. So our equipment director, Mike Wilson, is a stud and has searched high and low and scoured the country, and reported back last week that he is sad to say that we will not be able to have this thick stripe on our pants for the 23 season. But I can promise you, Drew, that we will get that thick stripe. Some way, shape, or form, we will make it happen. I may have to learn how to stitch, but we will get that thick stripe on those pants and look like Clemson baseball again.
Well, Coach, I really appreciate you taking some time to speak with me. Good luck on this season, and looking forward to getting out there to Doug Kingsmore soon.
Yes, sir. All right, Drew. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you having me on.
Thank you.